At a first glance, Slope is about as simple as a game can get. But when you take a closer look, there's so much more depth to this game. Today we'll be exploring Slope's mechanics, techniques, history, and more using this Iceberg chart. If you aren't familiar with this concept, the gist is that we start with the most obvious facts about the game, and slowly work our way down to some of the most crazy and obscure tidbits of information. This is going to be very long and dense for a video about Slope, so I recommend using YouTube's chapter feature to break up the video into smaller, more digestible sections. Finally, if you want a place to discuss Slope further and link up with other Slope enthusiasts, I recommend joining the Slope Community Discord server. The link will be in the description. With all that out of the way, let's begin. The vast majority of Slope players discovered and continue to play Slope in school. Even though the very best players also play Slope at home, playing at school is still a massive part of Slope's identity as a game. Slope's score mechanic is simple and effective. Chasing your own high score or even trying to beat your friends is a major part of what makes Slope so interesting and addictive. Slope's music track is iconic. I'm sure many of us have had mishaps where someone opens Slope in class and forgets to mute their computer, resulting in everyone knowing what they're up to. Most schools try to block game sites to keep students productive, so to combat this, hundreds of unblocked websites have cropped up to allow kids to play games on school computers. Anyone who has played Slope for a significant amount of time will know that the game is full of glitches. The ball will often bounce off of or phase straight through obstacles, and the player will sometimes have their control over the ball taken away. Sometimes these glitches are harmless, but they can often be very annoying and end a run. The most iconic obstacle in Slope is called the tray block, although this isn't an official name. The weaving maneuver required to get through them makes them very challenging for both new players just learning the ropes, and for experienced players going at high speeds. They can be both the most fun obstacle and the most frustrating. An easy and popular trick in Slope is going up the side of speed-up tunnels rather than through them. This looks cool, but because ramps actually slow you down, it can also make you go faster by skipping over the ramp at the end of the tunnel. The company that owns and publishes Slope is called Y8. You can play Slope and many other games on their website. Y8 hosts a newer version of Slope, but this version is actually much glitchier than the older and more popular version, which is hosted on most unblocked sites. Another version of Slope is available for Android devices on the Google Play Store, where it has over 1 million downloads. This version is more difficult due to touchscreen controls and even more frequent glitches. Horizontally moving blocks, which are called whores for short, are another one of the most frustrating obstacles in the game. They're hard to avoid since they're large and pretty random, making them difficult and potentially even impossible if you're going fast enough. A very well known and fun glitch in Slope is the double maps exploit. By spamming enter when you die or even just pressing enter once at the right moment, the old map will stay as it was, but a new map will also generate. This means that you can play 2 maps at once and get twice as many points. While this generally isn't allowed for high score runs, it is still a lot of fun to play around with. Variations of this glitch can get very wacky. There are many games out there inspired directly by Slope. Honestly, these games could be entire icebergs on their own. Some of the most popular ones are Slope Multiplayer, Slope 3, Crazy Roll 3D, and Galaxy Slope. Slope's leaderboard pops up at the end of every run, and it's a place to see the best scores of all time. At least, that's how it's supposed to work. Unfortunately, the leaderboard is no longer supported on unblocked websites, and because the game is glitchier and less popular on Y8's website, The highest scores there are relatively low, aside from the occasional hacked score that usually gets removed a few days later. As with any game or sport with a score to beat, Slope's world record is one of the pinnacles of achievement in the game. Currently, the world record is a score of 401 points by an Irish player named Hephren. It isn't uncommon for people to come up with different ways to play Slope to make it more interesting and challenging. The rules of these challenges are limited only by your imagination. A few of them include playing with the screen upside down, playing with your feet, playing on two devices at once, or playing with a friend where each of you control one direction. Slanted platforms, which are called slants for short, are a pretty simple obstacle which can be quickly understood by new players. For experienced players, however, they're infamous. At high speeds, they can force you into extremely difficult situations, and what's even worse than that is how prone to glitches they are. Many great runs have been lost to bouncing off of or phasing through a slant. One fun trick involves falling off of the side of these narrow platforms, commonly referred to as straights, onto the obstacle ahead of them. This causes the ball to skip the ramp and gain more speed. While it is quite a bit trickier, this can also be done on these longer, windier platforms, called snakes. The holy grail of Slope is a score of 417 points. This was the arbitrary score cap on the leaderboard put in to limit hackers. There grew to be hundreds of 417 scores on the leaderboard until it was wiped in February of 2022. New players won't know what it was like seeing a 417 on the daily leaderboard every few days, but the community continues to keep the legend alive, and there's even a $417 reward for the first player to actually get the score. The most popular Slope video on YouTube was uploaded by a player named Owen in May of 2018. It was one of the first recorded 200s in Slope's history, and the video is slowly approaching 2 million views. Owen has a few other great Slope videos on his channel too. Arguably the greatest Slope player of all time is Kylaxial. He set the world record 4 different times and held it continuously for over a year, despite playing in the most competitive era in Slope's history so far. He's been extremely influential thanks to the dozens of entertaining Slope clips and runs on his channel, and on top of his success with world records, he has been extremely dominant in Slope's speedrunning categories. Another popular side of Slope is speedrunning. The major categories include 50 points and 100 points. The most important tactics that speedrunners will use include skipping ramps on snakes and straights whenever possible, and going up the side of speed-up tunnels. Kylaxial is the world record holder in both major categories, and has been for most of their history. Verts, which are short for vertically moving blocks, consist of 3 blocks which move up and down. Their behavior is much more predictable than Horror's. The vert on the right hand side only starts to move 6 seconds after it is loaded in. If you manage to make contact with it before then, you will come to a complete stop. This unintended feature has become a major factor in high score runs. In certain circumstances, the player can fall off of the map without ever dying, although they will not gain points. This is usually linked to the double maps glitch, but it can happen without. If you leave the ball falling for a long period of time, it starts to glitch out, and this gets progressively crazier as time goes on. The icons for each layer in this iceberg come from this glitch. A popular Danish YouTuber named Lasse Vestergaard has started a trend among Danish players where they attempt to claim the highest score in Denmark. Lasse has held the Danish record himself a few times, but is usually quickly beaten by another player. Lasse has brought in hundreds of thousands of views with his various Slope videos. The term hyperspeed has no strict definition, but is often used to refer to unusually fast speeds, the likes of which most players will never see themselves. Surviving at hyperspeed is a staple of the highest level of play. In January of 2022, I established the Slope Community Discord server, alongside another player named Hooded Kupo. The server's existence led to a massive increase in competition, knowledge, and passion surrounding Slope. You can join the current server using a link in the description of this video. In the mid to late 300s, it is possible for the background buildings to disappear, leaving the player surrounded by the void. This bizarre glitch was first seen in February of 2022, when an update to the Y8 version caused this to sometimes happen as low as 80 points. Later that same year, this was seen for the first time in the unblocked version by Kylaxial in his 391. Before the current unblocked version of Slope was released in 2018, Slope's controls were much stiffer and the ball would bounce almost constantly, making the game significantly harder. I discovered this version on a sketchy Russian website in 2022, and called it the 2017 version, until a community member named Autumnburra discovered that it actually came out in 2016. The 2016 version has become pretty popular among the Slope community. Because of the different behavior of the ball, some insane things can happen in this version. The world record in this version is a 326 by Caraxes. It has been discovered that zigzagging in a certain rhythm can slightly increase your speed. This could be useful for speedruns, but it's only marginally faster. It has always been very common for players to do this zigzagging motion in the starting tunnel, just for fun. It's pretty common for players to have slightly less points than they should. This usually happens because the player is going quite fast before hitting a ramp, causing them to fly over the trigger that increases the point count. Something similar is possible with the speed up trigger, where the player may accidentally go around it. The creator of Slope is named Rob K, a game developer who worked on the original Guitar Hero game as the lead designer. Yeah, Slope is far from the biggest project he's made. He made Slope as a side project in 2014 before selling it to Y8 the next year. The player HC Boyfly has been playing Slope throughout most of its history. He has held multiple world records, including what is believed to be the very first recorded 200. He also has one of the earliest hyperspeed clips in an insane run from 2020. Even to this day, this run is looked upon in extremely high regard by the community. A major rival of HC's was Viera. They fiercely competed for the most impressive runs they could get throughout March of 2020. During this time, Michael got what is believed to be the first ever 300, a legendary run of 304 points which stood as the documented record for nearly 2 years. HC and Michael are both Danish, but the rest of the Danish Slope community is actually unaware of this fact, so their records aren't counted for the Danish record. Just a few days after the Slope Community Discord server was made, one of its members was able to beat Michael Viera's long-standing record. This was CXN, who became just the second player to break 300 points with his 320. Years before this, CXN had uploaded a 215 in 2019. This run was later used by Y8 in a celebration video when the game hit 100 million plays. Super Tunnel Skip occurs when the player is able to go from one tunnel roof to another with its speed alone, rather than taking advantage of jumps. It's a pretty cool looking and fun trick. Throughout the history of the Slope Discord server, several tournaments have been held. Due to the random nature of Slope's level generation and glitches, the results of these tournaments can be pretty all over the place, but they're usually quite fun. As an April Fool's joke in 2023, the aforementioned co-founder of the Slope Discord server, Kupo, posted a fake world record of 432 points. As it turned out, this was Kylaxial's 391, but with a manual score counter added and the original cropped out. There was also a subtle splice in the middle of the run to increase its length. It was made public a couple weeks after the fact, but it should not be confused for the real world record. A super tray block skip occurs when the player is able to go straight over the first block in a tray block with its speed alone. The speed required for this trick is higher than that required for the super tunnel skip. Despite the speed required for it, this trick is pretty desirable since it actually makes tray blocks easier. Pretentious skip occurs when the player lands on one of the lower levels of the tunnel obstacle. It looks cool, and for speedrunners it can be used to avoid hitting the top of the tunnel or the ramp at the end of the tunnel, both of which can slow you down. One of my personal favorite slope categories is no input, where the player isn't allowed to move at all. Players would often leave the ball to roll as far as possible at the start of a normal run. The highest score attained with this traditional method is 13. Now, multiple instances and a macro are used for this category, and the world record is a 25 by me. When the player causes a bounce by hitting the edge of a platform, it is called a bruh skip. It may be possible to do this purposefully to slow yourself down, but it likely isn't possible to do so consistently, and it probably wouldn't be worthwhile. The r/slope games subreddit is the #1 place on Reddit for all things slope. It's very inactive. There are a few memes and videos on there, but not much else. RNG blocks always spawn after a speed tunnel and consist of randomly scattered blocks. These RNG blocks do not spawn on the right-hand edge of the platform, making this thin area a safe zone. This can be very handy if the player clips through a speed tunnel, since it can be very hard to react to RNG blocks in time if this happens. One of the most influential people to the slope community is a Swedish player named Stuper, who is one of the earliest members of the Discord server. While he's never been one of the most elite players, he's responsible for the creation of the first speedrun category as we know it today, and for helping popularize most of the terminology we still use. Before selling the game to Y8, Rob K released the game on Congregate in September 2014. This 2014 version of the game has even worse controls than the 2016 version, and is even glitchier. It also features a different music track than every later version of the game. In October of 2022, a slope player named Nyame rapped over the slope beat, and it changed lives. Take a listen.
Yeah, I love slope, yes I do. I love slope, yes I do. I love slope, yes I do. Moving through the tray blocks, I gotta move. Busting all these beats, bitch, I gotta groove. I only win, but I never lose. I love slope, yes I do.
Best slope player in the world right now is Hephren. Despite his consistency, he's also had some pretty bad chokes. In his current world record, he dies in a situation that really should be no problem for a player at world record caliber. The worst one, though, is a 366 point run where Hephren slams right into the front of the tunnel while going at a very manageable speed. Had he not made this mistake, this run could have been another world record. Due to the amount of frustration in the community caused by Slope's glitches, a few players have taken it upon themselves to remake the game without these glitches. This project has been titled Slope 2.0. The first major strides towards this were made by a community member named Katie, and the project is currently being undertaken by Kupo. Slope 2.0's development has been turbulent, so there's little concrete information right now. Rob K made Slope in Unity using a plugin called Playmaker. This plugin utilizes visual scripting, which is more akin to coding with something like Scratch, rather than traditional programming. This same plugin was used for games like Hearthstone and Hollow Knight. Vert slowdowns are almost always done on the right-hand vert, but they're also possible on the middle vert. This is much harder, because instead of taking 6 seconds, the middle vert takes only 3 seconds to start moving. This has only been done a few times. For the past year, one of the best players in the world has been Walter. He's responsible for one of the most wild achievements I've ever seen in Slope. In a single day, Walter got a score of exactly 394 points twice, just 7 points shy of the world record both times. One obscure category is pillar percent, where the goal is to die on top of one of the red pillars as early as possible. This challenge was devised by Stuper, who later found that the earliest possible score is 4 points. However, it may be possible to do it at a score of 0, using a glitch that causes the player to clip outside of the starting tunnel. The music track used in the 2014 version is The Last Prophecy by ThaAwesome. It's a much longer and more complicated track than the loop which is used in the game today, which might be why Y8 removed it after their acquisition of Slope from Rob K. Regardless, ThaAwesome's name was left in the credits even though the new track's author is unknown. This new track actually had a very interesting audio bug when it was implemented. Take a listen. Using a super tunnel skip and a pretentious skip results in a super pretentious skip. Given enough speed, these can be done very early on, making them a very important aspect in the future of Slope speedrunning. A bizarre glitch that happens in the 2014 version of Slope is when the ball gets stuck on a ramp for a moment before getting flung forwards at a high speed. Recently, this glitch has also been replicated on the Y8 and Android versions of the game. In the 2016 version and earlier, a glitch could occur when the player died by falling off the platform and then died again by hitting one of the red pillars. If done correctly, the player will get stuck after respawning and have to refresh the game. There have been a couple attempts at assigning lore to Slope. There's one thread on the subreddit about this, which culminated in the original poster describing Slope as sentient balls called Zygorians competing in a death trial. In another interpretation of Slope lore, there's also a fantastic video on Kupo's YouTube channel, paying tribute to a lot of Slope's mechanics and history. In 2019, HC uploaded a run to 216 with some pretty high speeds. Years later, a player named ThaAwesome noticed that, even though HC was on the ground, his score didn't increase after an obstacle. Something similar later happened to a player named Bonkas on the Android version. This is peculiar because missed points are usually associated with going over the point trigger, which couldn't have happened in these situations. It's very likely that this has happened in many runs, but has simply gone unnoticed. In the 2014 version of Slope, it is possible to use a program called Cheat Engine to increase your score to absurd amounts. There's a video with nearly 100,000 views of someone doing this to get a score of 1,569,325,056 points. Because of the video's age, it isn't very well known to the community now. While attempting to make his own game, Kupo discovered an interesting quirk in Unity's physics engine. By spamming left and right while colliding with an object such as a ramp, it is possible for a lot of velocity to be built up. He tested this in Slope by having a macro spam left and right as he went up the side of a speed tunnel. This resulted in him accelerating much faster than he should have been able to so early in a run. He called this trick collider grinding. This trick is extremely difficult for a human, but using a macro like Kupo did could result in some very insane speeds being reached. If your score is at 50 points or higher when you trigger the next section of the map to be generated, then snakes and straights will no longer spawn. Because the 7th speed tunnel usually appears at 56 points in normal runs. This means that the 6th speed tunnel is the last one you'd normally see snakes or straights after. It isn't uncommon to get 1 or 2 missed points before the 7th speed tunnel, but one day Kylaxial managed to get 9, reaching what is normally the 56-point tunnel at 47 points. Sure enough, he saw snakes in a place where snakes should never be seen, after the 7th speed tunnel. Since then, a few other players have managed to do the same thing. Whores are much less well behaved than verts, but there is a pattern to them. Whores wait some random amount of time between 0 and 3 seconds before beginning to move. This was discovered by Katie when she began to work on Slope 2.0, and its discovery led to the theory that a whore slowdown might be possible, although it would be very difficult. So far, nobody has touched a whore and survived. Another discovery made by Katie was that Slope's code contains remnants of a few unused obstacles. One of these is a mirrored version of the snake obstacle, but with a straight added to the back of it to make it even longer. Another unused obstacle consists of 3 straights side by side, where each one has a block at the end. The player would have to either pick one of the safe straights or hope that they're able to roll onto a safe one. The first documented world record in Slope's history happened sometime within the first 2 weeks of the game's release. It was acknowledged in a tweet by Rob K, and a link to the video was attached. Unfortunately, by the time I discovered this tweet, the website that hosted the video, which was called Viera, had long since become defunct, and the video became a piece of lost media. The score attained in this video was a 139, a score that no documented run would be able to beat for the first 2 years of the game's history. Autumnburra attempted to recover it, but it didn't work out. In a stroke of luck, a few months after she had given up the search, ThaAwesome discovered that the VD run was re-uploaded on YouTube in 2018. And that's the end of the Slope Iceberg. Surprisingly, that only scratched the surface. There's a lot more detail to go into with many of these topics, and there are even many topics that were left out entirely. I hope to make even more Slope-related content in the future, so if you'd be interested in that, be sure to subscribe. And once again, if you want to know even more about Slope and get involved with the community, then please join the Discord server. Thank you for watching.